sure why, but if you'll notice, there's a little flash of a light, a little green flash of light. It's something on the slide. Don't know why it's doing that. Just notice it's not there. It's kind of remarkable, given why we're going to take a pause before we light our Shabbat lights tonight. This morning I went for a walk at Charles Park, and when I go walking, I tend to listen to podcasts. And I was listening to a podcast talking about the real history of the Pilgrims and Plymouth and the Wampanoag and Thanksgiving and the myth of Thanksgiving, because the relationships between the Pilgrims and the natives in that, the indigenous and Native Americans in that place, was not a picnic. It's not what we enjoy now. It's not that they all sat together and they all had a wonderful feast together. It was actually quite brutal. The Pilgrims, the Puritans, were quite awful and ran off the indigenous. And actually the first Thanksgiving was a celebration they had a short time after, actually celebrating that they had run off the Wampanoag and the other native people in that place. And the podcast I was listening to was talking about in the 1960s and 70s how some of the indigenous in that area started to push back. There was even a riot apparently in 1970. It was quite powerful to listen to it. And as I was walking in that, how do we celebrate Thanksgiving? Thanksgiving is a pretty amazing holiday. That idea of stopping in the middle of our fall harvest to show appreciation for the bounty that we have, to gather with friends and family, and to enjoy a good day of football. Right? If we're talking, only if the Cowboys lose. Spoken like a commander. Well, spoken like a Redskins fan. That's like that proves my point. I fully appreciate that, bro, and I think that's kind of the point. Why they changed the name, realizing the racist and the violence and the xenophobia that go with that term of what that football team used to be called. And as I was walking out of that park this morning, I was also realizing, some of you are probably aware, today is International Holocaust Memorial Day. There are Holocaust Memorial Days all over the calendar. In November, there's actually a Holocaust Education Week in the Florida schools because that is honoring the anniversary of Kristallnacht. This one today is set by the United Nations to mark the liberation of Auschwitz. And then the one we often celebrate or observe as a Jewish community is Yom HaShoah, which marks the fall of the Warsaw. Is it the fall or the beginning? The beginning of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And they celebrated and acknowledged, not celebrated, observed all over the world in all sorts of different places. And so I've got that history running in my head, this history of things running in my head. And this afternoon I found myself over at Willow School, which is just down the road, and they were completing their butterfly project, where they made the butterflies to remember and honor the 1.5 million Jewish children who were murdered during the Holocaust. We were having a rather intense discussion about remembering the sadness and how do we also balance that with bringing hope. And I walked out of that park as I'm thinking about all of these different pieces, and what really struck me is how do we feel the weight of the past? How do we remember these moments of brokenness where human and human were awful to each other, where there was real darkness, where there was real destruction? And whether it's anti-Semitism, whether it's racism, whether it's homophobia, whether it's sexism, whether it's against nation or culture, we have witnessed so much of that. Worried that my phone is going to blow up tonight because the video of the attack by police against an African-American motorist in Memphis is coming out tonight. I worry what that is going to do. And are thinking about all of that, how do we say never forget, we say never again, how do we feel that? And then my next one was, because it was talking about how do you balance the history and the myth? And I said, that's part of it, isn't it? The myth that we tell about Thanksgiving is we feel that history. What is the myth we tell? That in moments of challenge, people that were different from each other sat down together and took care of each other and survived the winter together. I know it didn't happen, but darn it, maybe we need to work on it happening in the future. Even if that's not what happened, there is something powerful in that story. In that story of these children saying, we're making these butterflies, we're remembering children who were murdered, and yet we're also going to think about how we can be pollinators like those butterflies and spread acts of goodness, kindness, and love. That just as we feel the weight of that loss and that darkness, can we think about those moments of ideal of what we want the world to look like and what the world at its best can look like, and bring that forward even as we feel that loss. And then, of course, as we were getting ready for services tonight, I made the mistake of looking at my phone. Some of you might have heard there was a shooting at a synagogue in Jerusalem with at least 7 dead. And I'm sorry to say that. Some of you might know, some of you might not. It's Holocaust Memorial Day. We're watching all of that brokenness, and that's why we gather on the Shabbat. And in a little while, we're going to read Torah tonight, and I'm going to be reading about the plague of darkness, and that is our challenge. How are we aware when that darkness falls, and how are we going to be a people that brings light? And so now, in memory and acknowledgement of the darkness of this day, I light this candle, or this light of memory and this light of response. As I share about the darkness, that this is a light of memory, it was December 11th. It was over at Our Savior. Did anyone go for the light labyrinth? That was the last time this light was used by an interfaith community group, walking journeys, each telling their own story and finding their own way to bring light into the world. Us at our best and us at our worst. And here we are on Shabbat, facing the darkness and bringing light. Our Torah portion on this Shabbat, give me just a second to orient where I am. Shamayim Vehi Barad. We just had some barad. Who knows what barad is?
I know what barad is.
What's barad, Cantor?
It is hail.
It's hail. So, if Moses lifts up his arm and hail falls, where are we in the Torah? We're in Exodus.
River, how do you say Exodus in Hebrew? Yes.
Okay.
Doing some good teaching here at our Hebrew school.
So we're in Shemot. We're actually in Parshat Bo. We're in the last of the plagues. After I read, I'll share a little bit of commentary. But the question I ask, why the 10th plague is the death of the firstborn. Why is darkness the ninth plague? As we are here on this very dark day, it feels like, as we are challenged to find ways of bringing light, we read of the ninth plague. And so I welcome Arnie and Loretta Silverberg. Yes, somebody's got to show Arnie how it's done. Ya'amdu ha'olim la'aliyah. So they come forward, and they're actually hosting tonight's oneg in memory of.
So you have more room?
Yeah.
Here, I can just read off of this unless you need this.
Yep. In honor of Arnie's father Stanley.
No, his brother.
Brother Stanley. Apologies on that. So here is this, if you want to mark the spot, and I'm reading from right here. Right
With
here.
with this?
Yep.
Okay, here we go. Okay. Archu et Adonai Hambarah.
Baruch Adonai Hambarach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hambarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Adonai Hambarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher b'chavonu mikol ha'amim. V'notan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayomer Adonai al Moshe. God said to Moses, Neteh yadcha al hashmai. Put your hands up in the sky. Vayehi choshech al eretz Mitzrayim. And then darkness will fall on the land of Egypt. V'yamesh choshech. And there will be great darkness. Vayet Moshe et yado al hashmayim. And Moses puts his hands up into the sky. Vayehi choshech afelah b'chol eretz Mitzrayim, that just coats all of the land of Egypt, shloshet yamim, for 3 days. Lo ra'u ish et achiv. No, the people, one person couldn't even see another person. V'lo kamu ish mitachtav. People couldn't even get up from their beds. Shloshet yamim, from where they were sitting, for 3 days. L'chol b'nei Yisrael, but the whole people of Israel, haya or b'mosh vot ba mosh votam. And but the people of Israel, they had light in all of their dwelling places.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher natan lanu Torah emet. V'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen. And we wish you a Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom to you too.
And so, why darkness? One of the things I say is that the medieval rabbis seem to either have been astronomers or physicians. Why astronomers? Because the medieval rabbis looked out to the heavens and they said, there's order out there, and I want to make sure the way that I move lines up with the order that's out there. And why physicians? Same thing, but the opposite direction. They said, there's order in here, and I want to make sure that my actions out there sync with the order in here. It's really a rather incredible way of looking at the world. And it matches up so powerfully with this Torah reading. The darkness was so thick that the Egyptians couldn't see anything. And one of the commentators says, well, why didn't they just light candles? Why didn't they just get themselves some light? And there are answers that it was so thick that their lights didn't even penetrate. Some say it wasn't even a physical light, it was psychological. They were just drenched in such darkness. Physical, spiritual, emotional darkness. Just what we are sitting here talking about, seeing what feels like coming in waves in so many ways in our own day and age. Incredibly enough, you see interactions and commentaries saying that this darkness was like the darkness before God said, "Let there be light." It is the darkness of chaos, where there is no order, where it doesn't make sense, where it's all breaking down, where it can't come together. Because what happens as soon as God says, "Vayihi or"? There was light, there was order, there was structure. We see it. Oseh shalom bimromav. God, you make shalom out there. Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. Help us make that shalom here. There is even descriptions that talk about that light, that is an Israelite's home being the light of shalom, that light of creation, and the light or the darkness they compare to Ge Ben Hinnom, Sheol, hell. It's described in the Bible. And that Ge Ben Hinnom, as they're describing, or Gehenna, Ge Ben Hinnom, some of you might have even been there. Has anyone here been to Jerusalem? Have any of you gone from outside of the old city into the old city? Have any of you seen the valley of darkness? Hell Valley. And why was it called Hell Valley?
It's hot and dry. No, that's what I thought.
Do you know why it's called Hell Valley? It's not the weather. That was where people were sacrificing their children to Moloch. That is the place where people were sacrificing their children to their idols. That's hell. That's that darkness. That's that chaos. What was in the Israelites' home? Light. That's our challenge. That's why we come to these services. That's why we read Torah. That is my challenge to all of us. When we see that chaos, when we see that destruction out there, whether it's in our past or whether it's in our present, can we be the ones that even when the darkness is so thick you can't see anything else, that find ways in our homes, those places we live, but in our Beit Knesset, in our houses of assembly, in the places that we go in our day, can we be the ones who find and create and make and share light? When there was darkness that covered the face of the deep and chaos ruled, God said, "Vayehi or." And here, right before the last of the very end of the plagues, the plague of darkness is the plague where people are bringing chaos and destruction into the world before they lose their firstborn. And the people of Israel, that's our challenge. Can we be the ones responding to that darkness, even as dark as it is, bringing light? And I say that with extra caution and extra oomph and extra chutzpah. It is so easy for us as we look at the world to start emulating the darkness and being cruel to each other, or short with each other, or impatient with each other. And there's your challenge. Even as we see it, can we bring light? And may that light be the light of Shalom. Amen.